Welcome back to the NutraSafe podcast, guys. Thank you guys for tuning into our last video. I certainly we talked about Alex Ovechkin a lot. I was scared he was going to fizzle out. I was scared I was going to pull a Joey there and jinx him and have him just be ice cold. Dude has been on a tear. 9 goals in the last 5 games. So he's really starting to pick it up. I think it's after 9 goals in the last 6 games. My bad. Today it's going to be exclusively March Madness. We had the first and second round of both the men's and women's tournaments that happened this past weekend. So we'll be breaking those down a little bit. Very interesting games. Awesome basketball. As I like to say, it was a couch weekend. So, Joe, you want to kick it off?
Yes, sir. Let's get excited. Over the weekend. Oh, I knew you were going to do something stupid like that. All right, let's get excited. Over the weekend, we had to see some of the best college basketball has to offer. Back and forth action, a few buzzer beaters, couple of comebacks, and some legends were born. But we didn't see as many big upsets as some of us, including me, thought there would be. It could cause us to have even better matchups this weekend. Everyone loves the Cinderella story until they get blown out in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8. But I don't think there's any Cinderella story left. Just elite basketball team against elite basketball team. And that is why I believe the best and most entertaining basketball is in front of us, not behind us. What are your thoughts? There's no Cinderellas left. There's only one double-digit seed in the Sweet 16, which I did not see coming. I had Drake. I had a couple of teams going to the Sweet 16, double-digit seeds. I think I had Arizona getting upset. I had Marquette getting upset. I had Alabama getting upset. And a lot of these teams proved me wrong on my doubts that I had for them. For example, Alabama. Who else was there?
Clemson.
Duke looked good. Clemson? Yeah, Clemson, I mean, they're one of those teams that just like, I bet on them a couple times. They hit for me once, and then all of a sudden they're out here like the Globetrotters. Like, I don't understand how that happens. But what are your general thoughts? And then I'll give mine, and then we'll get into some of the weekend's action.
So, I personally was very bummed out Thursday to watch that South Carolina game. That gave me depression. That was awful. I've never seen our bigs get bullied around like that outside of the Auburn games. And if I all credit to Jermaine Couisnard. I don't actually think that's what his first name is. I can't remember his first name is. It's something like that. And then Bali Dante for really setting the tone and the pace there with their defense and their ability to score when like and put runs together. And really, they put that South Carolina team away in the first half. Closing down the first half, I don't think South Carolina had a bucket for what 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes.
Yeah, and then they hit that buzzer beater. That buzzer beater was huge because it kept it within 5. That put them within 5. And then they came out and Couisnard, just hitting threes, like making fadeaways, all that type of stuff. But
I know ESPN said it like 5 times during the second half of that broadcast, but he's a former South Carolina guy. He did it to his own guys.
dude's a baller, though.
Yeah.
Dude's a straight. I mean, you were an Oregon fan and then you switched to South Carolina. I meant to ask you this before the weekend started. Was there any conflict in you, or were you just straight South Carolina?
So when I can't remember what age it was, but my maternal grandmother made me an Oregon blanket. And so I do currently have that in my possession. It is upstairs in my apartment. Um, I was wearing that while wearing South Carolina t-shirts. I had the South Carolina flag behind me. So there was no losing for me there. It was a win-win either way. Going through middle school and high school, I had to watch those Oregon teams have such high expectations and completely flop in the first and second rounds. Um, So this year, I mean, it was cool to see them beat. Well, I guess it wasn't cool to see them beat South Carolina, but it was cool to see them put up the fight they did against Creighton. Proud of the guys there for doing that. But no, there wasn't really a conflict of interest. I mean, you know where my loyalties lie. I bleed red. Oh, I guess garnet.
You bleed
I
SEC too.
yes, I'm very pro SEC, but I will say the SEC probably had one of the crappiest performances in college basketball this past weekend.
Play it.
I'm
Play it. There you go.
That's for me catching myself. I was impressed with that.
I saw that. All right.
But
So go ahead.
I would say SEC play probably could have been summed up by the word I was gonna say.
Yeah. All right. So my general thoughts were there are a lot of comebacks over the weekend.
Hmm.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. All four of those days. There were great comebacks, great runs. In the first round, the lower seeds, like the 15 seeds, 16 seeds not so much, but the 14 seeds, some of the 13 seeds, they really kept it close with these big dogs in their regions for a while until basically the second half. They made the second half adjustments, and eventually the higher seed ended up winning by almost 20. But I was really impressed with how close some of these lower seeds kept it. Um, very chalky, very chalky. Like I said, there's only one double-digit seed. Um, but I think that makes for better basketball because I don't think NC State is a Cinderella story. I think they were in the ACC tournament, but I think they've established themselves as a damn good basketball team. And then, last but certainly not least, the reffing was absolutely awful this weekend. There was no consistency. One, and we're going to get to it, but how did Samford get screwed out of that game?
That was
How?
that was the worst call I've ever seen. I mean, that was
I said that was a
so
block before the replay. I was
it was
watching that game. It was
so
1 o'clock in the morning. I was screaming in my apartment. Like, and I think I had Samford money line. And that was that was a huge payout. How do you not call that? Because that pretty much put Samford out of reach. And how is that not reviewable? Y'all went and reviewed every single thing that happens in the last 2 minutes of the game. How is that not reviewable? I have no idea how that's not reviewable. The reffing was not consistent. Either be touchy with fouls or don't. And yesterday, the Marquette game, where there was hardly no fouls called, was a great game. It was a very entertaining game. I loved watching that game. But there are other games like the Alabama game, where they're super touchy and inconsistent, where it wasn't boring, but it got to the point where it's like, why are we have 35 free throws in the first half between both teams? Like, there's no reason for it. I say let the boys play. Reffing was awful all across the boards for pretty much every team. I don't think there's really a game where you can blame the refs for screwing a team out of the game, except maybe Samford. But even then, Samford had the chances to win that game, put Kansas away, and they didn't. They allowed Kansas to extend that lead. But the reffing was unbelievable. But, and I saw this earlier today, and this is the last thing I want to say on this. There are only two jobs where there's no accountability: refereeing and politician. Am I wrong?
no.
All right, we're taking Briggs' soundboard privileges away. All right, you want to get into specific games, or you got anything else you want to say?
Not really. I mean, I feel so bad for those Samford guys having their season basically end on terrible call. Um, if there was going to be a definition of something being all ball, that was it. I think that one of the main reasons the refs may have called that was because the Kansas guy came down so hard on the floor. And so, in
It
real time, you may be able to be like, "Oh, hey, he pushed him or something," but it was such a bad call, especially in a
uh,
game like that. I mean, where it's so dang close, you just gotta let that one go. But yeah,
and it, if
go
you
ahead.
watch the replay, the ref was right there. He could have seen all ball. I said this when the game was live. I was screaming in my apartment while it was live because I was hyped for Sanford to get the block, and I was like, "Wait, there's a foul?" But or Sanford to get the block, because that was a huge block. But um, let's get into specific games. Um, I'm gonna read off the game. I'm gonna get your initial thoughts, and then I'll get into my thoughts as I've been sitting in deep, dark, cold rooms trying to figure out what I think of these games. First one we're gonna start off on South Carolina and Oregon. South Carolina could not buy a bucket for a lot of this game, and Oregon's Oregon got their guys back, but they had a lack of depth. They needed Kuznauer to put up 40 to win this game. I think Dante had like 25 and like 15. Um, and South Carolina could not score on that zone. I don't know what it was. It was almost like they suffocated on like Houston's defense does or UConn's defense does. Like South Carolina could not get the ball inside the paint and score consistently. And they really struggled with that zone. It led to a lot of turnovers. Um, and Oregon turned the ball over a lot in the first half. And then I think when South Carolina started going on that scoring drought, about 7-8 minutes left, they stopped turning the ball over, and it's what pulled them away, along with South Carolina not being able to score for 6-7 minutes. And a lack of a big, really like a big for South Carolina kind of showed. Like they don't have anyone like Dante. So that showed. I think some of it showed a lot Lamont Paris's inexperience. Even though it was a hell of a year, they were projected to finish 14th in the SEC this year and were 16th in the NCAA tournament and got a really bad draw with Oregon. Um, and when I initially watched this game, I was at work that night. I thought South Carolina's pace was the problem, and Oregon kind of did what South Carolina did better, is what I feel like. They beat them at their own game. You know South Carolina ball more than I do. You probably watched a lot more of the games. You had to watch them live. I didn't. So those are my initial thoughts. I'll get yours, but that's my initial thoughts. Hell of a year for South Carolina. All the props to Lamont Paris. I think South Carolina is not disappearing anytime soon, but I think Kuznard and Dante just were too much for South Carolina.
So I don't know if you saw the news today, but Michi Johnson has entered the transfer portal.
Oh, and Michi,
Huge,
they contained Michi. That they contained Michi. Michi didn't do
huge,
anything.
huge loss for the Gamecocks there. Um, but you go back earlier in the season, look at the Kentucky game and the first Tennessee game at Rocky Top. One of the big things that allowed us to go and upset those teams was our ability to get points inside that allowed us to suck their defense in and open up the 3 point. Um, Thursday, that just didn't happen. I rarely saw Colin Murray Boyles inside by the hoop, where he normally is. I mean, when he dropped 30 against Vandy, it was pretty much all putbacks and dunks. And so,
That's also Vandy.
well, I mean, it was still we were losing at the end of the half, the first half, and we needed something big coming out of the second. But I mean, also a freshman big dropping 30 on someone isn't normal. So I'll say that. But you look at some of the things that they did earlier in the season that allowed them to succeed and like kind of blow past expectations. They weren't able to get any of that going against Oregon. So credit to them for shutting, especially in Folly Dante, for shutting down the lane and not allowing South Carolina to get any offense going there towards the end of the first half, and kind of keeping that going into the second half as they were able to keep that cushion and not ever really allow South Carolina to come back in the game.
How many blocks they had? He had at least like 3 or 4. He
I
had to
think
have. It
so. I
felt
was
like he was
looking.
blocking everything near the hoop.
So I think they officially credited him with only two. But I mean, again, there's a lot more shots that he affected around the hoop.
Just
Um,
because he's a monster.
I mean, dude's huge. And that's the thing is, you go back to the Auburn games, our bigs got bullied on the inside, and that's what allowed for Auburn to go and just blow the shit out of us twice. And so you look at what N'Faly Dante did. He goes and he bullies the crap out of Colin Murray Boyles. They ended up having to put Josh Gray in, who still a pretty capable big. He's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more violent, I will say. Not as good with the handles. No offense, Josh, if you're seeing this, he's got a terrible shot. Um, could not make free throws earlier in the season. Thankfully, clutched up there in the second Georgia game. I think he had like 5 or 6 free throws just because he was such a beast when he was going up. Um, but yeah, so those were my thoughts. Again, the inability to get stuff going on the inside to open up the rest of the court really kind of suffocated and strangled that South Carolina offense.
Yeah, and I think it was obvious, and we got to move on, but I think it was obvious very early that South Carolina could not figure out the zone Oregon was running. I don't know what zone they were running. They were putting a lot of pressure on the guys on the outside, couldn't move it inside. I think they were scared of Dante. It's kind of like the Zach Edey effect, where no one can get points in the paint just because Zach Edey's so huge. And Dante's nowhere near the size of Zach Edey. I mean, he's like big, but he's not like 7'4" big. And so, um, I think it was very obvious early in that game. I had to rewatch it because again I was at work during this game, but those were my thoughts. Kentucky and Oakland, both teams could not shoot, and then Chandler Bing from Friends happened. Dude went 10 for I think it was 10 for 20 from three, had like
Yeah,
33 points.
he had 32. He had 2 free throws. Those were his only other points other than a 3 pointer.
My man is a straight dog. And I'm gonna see if we can upload this clip tomorrow because I really want to play this. I just want to experience it again. The way that man contorted his body to shoot those threes, it looked so good. And my thoughts after the game were Oakland pretty much went as Goki goes. And foreshadowing here, Goki did not have as good of a game. He was not as clutch. Or he still made shots, but he wasn't as big of a part as he was in the Kentucky game. And I don't know how much time Coach Cal has left. Be careful what you wish for, though, on both sides. If you're Kentucky and your other fans. Because if you get someone that can get the most out of Kentucky, like per se a Nate Oates, even though Nate's not leaving Alabama. But if you can get someone that can get the most out of Kentucky, that is terrifying. But also, if you're Kentucky, you hire the wrong guy, it's going to be a problem. You can't hire the wrong guy because, I mean, one tournament win in 4 years is not acceptable at Kentucky, but it could be worse. That's a high-class problem. As an Ohio State fan in basketball, it's a high-class problem. We're competing for the NIT right now. We just, we barely beat Virginia Tech. So, just be careful what you wish for. I thought Goki clutched up. I think Goki shot well enough for long enough to get the other guys going, like Watts and the other guy's name is slipping my mind right now. Allowed those guys to get going. That was the best game on Thursday. Best game of the day. Just back and forth. A lot of threes, a lot of offense. It was an absolutely tremendous game. And I really enjoyed watching that. I was very I was not glued to my seat for that game. I was very excited, and definitely enjoyed watching that game.
If you were to take a guess at what the buyout for John Calipari is, what do you think that number is?
I know the number. Do you want me to take a guess?
Yeah,
My guess would be 20 million, but it's gonna be 30. It's 33 million.
it's 35 as of April 1st. I don't think Kentucky is going to get rid of Calipari this offseason just because that 35 is so big.
So they do have a provision in his contract that allows Kentucky to move him into an administrative role starting this offseason. So I don't. And Kentucky's got money. Kentucky's a big dog when it comes to basketball. They ain't short on money.
The thing
And
is that 35 million though, that is a big chunk of what you have available. So you'd have to go and take that out of your funds that you have reserved for other things. So
Kentucky recruits itself. It's just like Alabama football or Ohio State football. It recruits
but
itself.
how much of that's Calipari and what he's done with being able to get guys like Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepard who are going to end up being like first round picks here in the
Lottery
NBA
picks.
draft. So part of that I think is Calipari actually being able to develop guys. Whether or not they go and win in the March Madness, I think is kind of besides the point. Because what I think a common trend that we're starting to see, especially over these past couple seasons, and I know this is something you've been preaching a lot lately, is you're going to go deeper into March when you have more senior players. When you come in with a lineup full of freshmen and sophomores, you're not going to be able to go as well or go as far because you don't have that experience, which is crucial, especially when you get to March and, excuse me, in the playoffs. So I just,
Well,
when you look at it
well,
that way,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, Cal hasn't been able to keep guys there. They all go to the NBA after the first year.
Exactly. He's just recycling
Cal's
freshmen.
not able to keep guys there. So what like, and I'm on both sides of this because part of it's not fair to Calipari, but you see the guys that come out of Kentucky, and it's just, how have you only won one natty? And you wouldn't have won it without Anthony Davis. That's that's my thing. I'm on both sides of this. I really don't have an opinion on this. Uh, because I don't. I mean, Kentucky can do what Kentucky wants. I'm just wanting both sides, but you can't lose. I mean, you can't have one tournament win in 4 years at Kentucky. I don't care who you got on that team. You can't have one tournament win in 4 years at Kentucky. That's the thing with me. And you've got all the resources if you're Kentucky. I would not be surprised if Kentucky pays the buyout. I wouldn't be surprised if they move him. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him. And I don't like seeing anyone lose their job. I really don't. But I just wonder how much longer. Even if you wait till next year, say they don't even make it to the Sweet 16, they go to the round of 32. Then what? 2 tournament wins in 5 years at Kentucky? It's just, and you haven't done anything in the conference tournament either. If you're Kentucky, so just come postseason, they just fall apart. Now I didn't think Kentucky could play defense, and it showed because they gave up 10 threes to Chandler Bane. So I it could be worse. I also think the SEC is fraudulent. And I was one of the people that fell for the SEC might be the best conference in college basketball hype. And they went 3-5 in the first round. I think they got
I
two teams to the Sweet 16.
I think their biggest thing, and I mean, you look at Alabama, you look at Tennessee, you look at Kentucky. What is one of the bigger common denominators there?
Mm, not sure where you're going.
They all have somewhat of a problem playing defense. Auburn,
I mean,
Auburn,
Tennessee can buckle it down though. I mean, you seen what Tennessee did against Texas.
Texas made a push late. Texas was coming back. I think you go in
And
and you put
Tennessee
it.
still clutched up. They gave up like 48 points
Yeah,
or
but I mean,
55 points.
you go back to earlier in the season. Wasn't the Kentucky Tennessee game like in the 90s?
I mean, maybe, but either way,
So I get it.
Alabama and Kentucky, I can agree with you. But Tennessee, I feel like Tennessee can play defense. And then, even then, Alabama played defense against Grand Canyon. They played lights out defense because they had to win that game off of defense because the
But
shots were not falling.
but I'm
And they,
saying over the course of the regular season, from what we were able to see in the sample size that we got high octane offense and mediocre defense.
yeah, but Auburn can play defense. Auburn
So can
lost to Yale.
South Carolina.
So can
And
Texas A&M.
South Carolina gave up a 40 piece. I mean, Texas. I think Texas A&M probably was one of the better SEC teams in the tournament.
Or, I'm sorry, Mississippi State. Mississippi State. Texas A&M just lost to Houston last night. Mississippi State.
They sent that to overtime.
Not against Michigan State. Texas
No,
A&M sent or
I
Houston.
was talking about A&M. They sent the Houston game to overtime on the buzzer beater 3 at the end of regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I mean, a lot of these teams can. We gotta move on.
Let's move on.
JMU Wisconsin. I ain't got a lot to say about this. JMU, you were right.
I called
was
it.
sketchy. I was sketchy about this game. I was really sketched out by this game. I thought everyone was talking about JMU. JMU's a sexy pick. JMU's super athletic. JMU came out flying. And the game was even after JMU went up. Like, I don't even remember how much they went up by. But after the first 10 minutes of the first half, it was even. The game was completely even. They were going back and forth. It was a hell of a game after that. But just, it was such a JMU came out so fast, and I think it just hit. They just punched Wisconsin right in the mouth. Just punched them right in the mouth, and Wisconsin couldn't recover. And it was JMU made their early run, but that game was even, and that's why JMU got their pants pulled down by Duke. That's what I was worried about. JMU got dominated by Duke, but Wisconsin didn't look good in the first 10 minutes, and that's what cost them the game. Other than that, I ain't got much because there's not much to comment on. It's just JMU was making shots early and Wisconsin wasn't. And that's been the problem with Wisconsin the last couple years, is they can't make shots and just end up not being able to make the tournament or be able to win in the tournament.
Again, I don't know if you saw this earlier. JMU's head coach is headed to Vanderbilt.
That's a good hire for Vandy.
I think it's a big loss for JMU. JMU's kind of established themselves on the map here in the past couple of years, especially in the basketball
They've established themselves in both major sports.
I think when we get closer, or when we go in and analyze the Sun Belt schedule, I'll talk about JMU. I've got my thoughts on them. Not going to share them now. We're talking about basketball, but tune in for that because there's going to be some fire coming out of my mouth. Not profanity, but I'll be spitting facts.
Whatever you.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to press the button for it. It's too far.
Oh man.
But I mean, you talk about JMU coming out fast. I think what allowed them to come out fast was they came out fast and they were able to play defense. They forced on 36 possessions, they had 10 steals and 13 turnovers. I can't remember if that was the first half. But again, that's 10 steals and 13 turnovers is pretty dang good. So,
yeah.
I don't have much else to say on it. I called it. That was probably my bigger pick of the week. But
it was a huge pick, and a lot of my upsets did not work out the way I thought they would. But
yeah, I was gonna say outside of them and the Caps, we did terrible. And if you put money on our picks, I am so sorry.
Just wait until football season. Football's my bag.
Yeah,
And hockey
we got
playoffs. Hockey playoffs and football are my bag.
well, we got to make it there first. I mean, we're almost at 500 right now. But moving on, Yale, Auburn, something I don't think anyone saw coming.
Yeah. Auburn Auburn's got this problem of where they look good in their entire athletics. They look good in the regular season, super good, and then they blow it in the postseason. And Auburn was one of my Final Four teams. How, like, why? One, why are we taking this many stupid fouls? How can you not make a free throw or a good shot when it mattered? Like when it matters, and give Yale their flowers. But Auburn lost that game. Auburn was the favorite. They should have closed it out late, and they didn't. They let Yale back in the game. And you saw this multiple times. You saw this last night against in Houston and Texas A&M, which we'll get to. But how does that happen? But Yale clutched up and I thought they could have been a Cinderella, and then they got embarrassed by, I forget who it was. Who did Yale get embarrassed by yesterday?
Arizona.
No, they were a 4 seed, or Yale was playing a 4 seed. They were playing a 5 seed.
I can't remember.
But Yale got embarrassed yesterday.
San
Um,
Diego State.